And in response to President Zelensky's visit to the U.S., the Kremlin has accused the United States of fighting a proxy war against Russia after Washington boosted military support for Ukraine. A Kremlin spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, told reporters the latest U.S. support package, which comes on top of some $50 billion already sent to Ukraine, would not help end the more than 300-day-long conflict. The Ukrainian president enjoyed a hero's welcome on his trip to Washington on Wednesday, with his U.S. counterpart Joe Biden committed to providing Kyiv with $1.8 billion worth of military equipment, including the highly sought-after Patriot missile defense system. Now, for more on President Zelensky's historic visit to the United States, lecturer of politics and international relations at the Liverpool Hope University, Dr. Bola Adediran, joins me now on The What Now. Good to have you join us.
Thank you for having me.
So you and I have had so many conversations on Ukraine and how whether this war is going to end anytime soon and just general support for Ukraine. But let me get your thought now, because no one saw this coming, that President Zelensky was ever going to make this visit to the U.S. He made that announcement, and the very next day he traveled to the U.S. What's your thought on this visit and the speech he made at Congress?
Well, I think that at the beginning of the conflict, it was not a time for him to go. Don't also forget that we saw a different leader take a different course of action last year when the Taliban were rolling through the streets of Kabul, and President Ashraf Ghani literally disappeared overnight from his country, leaving his country to the Taliban. So, and this contrast with what President Zelensky has done, which is to stay within the country, even when Kiev was being bombed. He fought back and he showed a lot of courage and bravery, which won him a lot of applause and support across the world. So there was also that sort of strategic positioning that he needed to do, which is for him to get the support internationally to show that he was courageous enough to take the fight to the Russians. But I think that why this trip has come at this time also is principally not only because, Ukraine has made some gains over the last 300 days, as you've mentioned, but also because we're seeing a change of guards in the U.S. Congress, particularly in the U.S. House of Representatives, where the Republicans are going to be taking the House leadership. And we are already seeing House Republicans make claims that the time of blank check for the Ukrainians is no longer is gone, and that there would be auditing and there will be questioning over the amount of money that has been spent in Ukraine. So there's going to be more scrutiny regarding the military aid that is being sent to Ukraine. So I think that part of this visit is designed to speak to Republicans who may be considering taking more a difficult approach on Ukraine, and directly talking to them and negotiating with them in some ways, and appealing to them to sustain the military aid to Ukraine. So I think that this speech and this visit is strategically designed to address that.
I will get there in just a moment, but I also want to bring to your notice, and I'm sure you have been following the conversation so far. You would have noticed that people are now drawing some sort of comparison between his speech to Congress and that of former UK Prime Minister Winston Churchill, who was also a wartime leader in 1941 during the World War II. And he was made popular also by that war. What's your thought on that speech and this particular speech?
Obviously, they are completely different scenarios. I understand that, 80 years ago, Churchill stood before the U.S. combined Congress, both the Senate and the House, and gave a rousing speech that literally galvanized the Americans and increased support for military aid to UK from the American Congress. The difference, obviously, is that we're not this is not a world war, and even though in some ways the U.S. is already engaged in some proxy war in Ukraine. But I agree with you, and I agree with people who see some sort of relationship between the sort of the stature that Zelensky is beginning to have. It was recently it was recently given the honor of being the Times Man of the Year, and all of those things are great for him. But these are different situations. Obviously, Churchill in 1940, in the 1940s, and Zelensky in 2022 are not the same thing. Partly because the world is not at war. But I think that there is some obviously some resemblance.
And whether that is going to galvanize, this speech is going to galvanize support as much as that of Mr. Churchill remains to be seen. But I want to ask you because one of the things that President Biden did promise during a joint press conference between both presidents was the fact that the American people are with Ukraine all the way. And my stress is on all the way. Because when you consider the impact of the winter and the energy prices, is the reality more complicated than that?
Obviously, I think across the world there is clear evidence that people are tired of the consequences of the war, not only in terms of the energy prices and the cost of living and the inflation and the sort of a global recession that we're currently seeing across countries, especially in Europe and in parts of Africa. But I also think that the human toll. People are concerned about the fact that thousands of people have died, not only Ukrainians, but the Russians. And war is, it's an immeasurable tragedy. And if we can find ways in which we can address and bring it to speedy conclusion, then we ought to follow that path. What is also very concerning across the world is that it seems like there is no path to peace. For me, it was also particularly concerning that the Ukrainian president was effectively given a laissez-faire blank check that by the U.S. president, they said, we will support you unto the point where you are willing to sit down and negotiate with the Russians. And you are going to call the terms of whatever negotiations that is going to come about. And I think that that's unfortunate because the U.S. has a capacity to impose and impress on Zelensky and the Ukrainians to seek a solution, to seek talks. Now, I know that there are concerns that any talks with Russia could be a disguise for Russia to rearm itself and then sometime later in the future to launch an attack. So I understand that particular perspective. But at the same time, I think that it is sad that we're not also looking at the path for peace, because human beings are dying in their thousands, and this war has been a meat grinder for both sides. On the battlefield, Ukrainians are losing thousands of soldiers, and thousands of civilians in Ukraine have died. And so we ought to seek a path to peace. And it's unfortunate that, especially from the Ukraine and the Western side, there is a reluctance to pursue the path of peace.
And Putin has continued to call this a proxy war. How he will react is what the rest of the world is waiting to see. Thank you so much for talking to us. Lecturer of Politics and International Relations at the Liverpool Hope University, Dr. Bola Adediro.
Thank you.